So she has a vast experience in terms of glaucoma. So she's gonna take us through UBM இன்னைக்கு ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ண மது.
Hi friends, so let's start. Today's topic will be on basics and interpretation of UBM. Okay, so what we are going to cover today is what is UBM, what are the indications for UBM, how to perform the procedure, and then how to interpret a report. Okay, so first we'll see about who developed UBM. So it was Dr. Charles Pavlin who developed the UBM, and it was he took a first clinical image in March 1990, and the model was first commercialized in 1994 along with Zeiss. Okay, so now let's go to a topic which is ultrasound biomicroscopy. So we all know sound is a vibratory disturbance within a solid or a liquid which travels in a wave pattern. So it has a particular frequency. The frequency of ultrasound is greater than 20,000 hertz, which is very high. So high frequency provides less penetration and gives high resolution. So therefore what happens, in our eyes our average size of eye is around 23 to 24 millimeter only. So it requires less penetration only. So when it gives less penetration, the resolution also becomes high. So therefore this ultrasound fulfills the demand for capturing the images of our ocular structures. So the different kinds of probes, ultrasound probes available. There are A-scan probes which has a frequency about 10 million hertz, and B-scan probes where the ranges is from 10 to 50 million hertz. So now in next slide we're going to see about the differences which the UBM provides than the other scans. Okay, the frequency of a UBM probe is around 20 to 50 million hertz, and B-scan provides around 12 million hertz. This B-scan is our which we use in our hospital for scanning the retinal structures. So the frequency probe which is used in our hospital is around 35 million hertz. We have both 50 and 35, but the common thing which is used in our clinic is 35 million hertz. So both are provides oscillating sound waves only. When you see the depth of penetration, it is less in UBM, which is very much required because we are going to scan only the anterior segment, which is around 5 to 10 millimeters only, and the penetration is more in B-scan, which provides up to the orbital tissue, that is around I have provided the microns. So resolution is high in a case of UBM and resolution is less in B-scans. So these are the common features which the UBM provides: high frequency, so less penetration, high resolution. Okay, and how much it penetrates is around 5 to 10 millimeters. So now let's cover the basic the indications for UBM. In glaucoma cases, the main thing they ask for UBM is to see the angle structure. How is the angles in the eye? How is the iris placed? Whether it is anteriorly elevated, that is posterior elevation of the iris, or how is the structures, ciliary body? How is it present? Is it anteriorly rotated? Whether there is any mass or anything. UBM is indicated in those cases. To see the lens and zonal structures also, they ask for UBM. Mostly this is the cases which they ask for zonular and PC integrities is during the cases of trauma. Hello.
Yeah, Madhu.
Hello.
Yes, Madhu.
Yes, Madhu.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm. So
Fine.
zonular PC integrity integrity is asked in cases of trauma or in cases of iris coloboma, where there in case of coloboma, they wanted to see whether the zonules are intact or not. How is the zonular structures? Then in cases of phacodonosis, unknown cause of phacodonosis also, they will ask to check for the zonular integrity. If they're going to perform any cataract surgeries or any surgeries, they will see for the integrity. And then mostly they will ask to see for lens and IOL position. That is, whether in cases of trauma, whether the lens or IOL is subluxated, dislocated. How is the lens position? They will ask. Next, in cornea and hello.
Continue, Madhu.
In cornea, next we'll see about in cornea and ocular surface cases. The main reason for indication for UBM is during corneal opacities. They will ask in total corneal opacities, we cannot see the posterior structures. How is the lens, whether it is developed or not? How is the angular structure? How is the iris located? Whether is there any posterior synechiae? Whether in cases of children, whether the lens is there or not. So indication for UBM in corneal cases is to see the anterior chamber, how is the structures present. And to next, the one more for ocular surfaces, in cases like OSSN, any nodular scleritis or any abnormal growth in the conjunctiva, to see whether how is the depth, whether it is involving the episcleral structure, sclera, or whether it is involving the anterior chamber, how is the cyst or mass which is present on the conjunctiva, we'll see the depth, how much it is located. Next, in cases of in uveitic cases, during the inflammation, whether there are any specific membranes present, why is the inflammation recurring, why is it active, is there any abnormality in the CB or CB regions, whether there is a plastena membranes, whether there is any inner mass or whether there is any inner tumor which is located. For those cases, it will be asked. In sometimes during they ask to see UBM, and that is mainly to see whether any suprachoroidal effusion is there. Suprachoroidal effusion is nothing but abnormal accumulation of fluid in the suprachoroidal space, that is between the sclera and choroid. So we'll see the images, how is it, but the main in cases for retina disorders and all, they will whether in cases of hypotony, they will mainly ask to see for effusion, whether any fluid accumulation is there or not. In retinal cases, they will ask to see for FEP.
What is hypotonic?
Hypotony, when the IOP is less than 10 mm of Hg. In cases we see no hypotonic cases where the intraocular pressure is 0, 1, 2. In those cases, they will ask to see. It is not there in this. The suprachoroidal effusion is there. Suprachoroidal effusion is indicated when there is hypotony.
Yeah.
Okay.
Following vitreoretinal surgeries,
there will be sudden drop in. There will be sudden drop in intraocular pressures. So in those cases, they will ask to check whether any choroidal effusion is there or not. In vitreal retinal surgeries, they will ask to, in cases of recurrent vitreous hemorrhages, they will ask for UBM. Why they ask UBM is to check for FEP, which is nothing but fibrovascular proliferation, to see whether any abnormal growth is there in the sclerotomal site, any foreign body is there. They will ask to see in UBM. Okay. And UBM is also indicated to see whether any mass lesions are present, any cyst is present, iris cyst, CB cyst, then iridociliary cyst. All these cysts will be easily visible in UBM. Okay. So these were the FEP is fibrovascular proliferation. Any abnormal growth in the sclerotomy sites.
Madhu, just previous slide.
Which one? This one.
So actually, as Madhu said, for lens and zonules, whenever the patient is having any trauma or whenever for looking for the IOL position, in that case we will do the UBM. And in some cases in which the patient is having some kind of syndrome like Marfan syndrome, where the lens itself will have some kind of dislocation, and in that conditions will mostly they will advise for UBM. And mostly when the patient is having any kind of trauma, why UBM is advised, they will look for the clock. Actually, UBM is performed in every clock hours, so they will look for the zonal weakness in a particular clock hour. So they will go for the surgery either to fix the IOL in the PC bag, or once if the zonules or the zonal ciliary zonals is weak in the entire clock hour or more than 4 clock hour, then they will do
Anand, I'll cover those in previous next slides.
Okay, Madhu.
Madhu, can you increase your screen brightness?
1 second.
Fine.
It is full.
Fine, go ahead.
Not visible.
Visible.
Hey, increase in your phone, Ra. Increase the clarity, brightness in your phone.
Fine. And then
Okay.
So now we have discussed about the indications. Now we'll go to the procedure, how UBM is done. Okay. The patient is asked to lie down in a supine position, which I have mentioned in the first image. You can see the image. The patient is asked to lie down in supine position. Then we use the topical anesthesia to numb the cornea. Okay, and then we place the eye cup. This you can see the cup in the third image. This is how the cup UBM cup will be there. The size of the cup depends on the corneal diameter. So the normal corneal diameter, the horizontal and vertical diameter will range from 10 to 12 mm, right? So the corneal the diameter of the cup will be greater than the corneal diameter. So the mostly available cups size is like 16 mm and 18 mm. So the cup is placed like that, and we use a coupling medium. It can be methyl cellulose, or we use a normal saline. In our clinic, the most we use is the normal saline.
You will be measuring corneal diameter before performing UBM?
No, no. I'm just telling the cup of the size of the cup depends on the corneal diameter. Okay, it should be greater than the corneal diameter. So there we have 16 and 18, right? So if the we know in microcorneal we can use a 16 mm cup also. If in the normal cases we mostly use 18 mm cup.
Okay.
So then we introduce the probe, which is this probe is used for scanning the images. Okay. So what is the basic principle of UBM is same as ultrasound. So we immerse a transducer in the medium, which is nothing but a normal saline. So the frequency is the sound. It transmits high frequency sound waves, which strikes the ocular structures and reverts back. The reverted back waves are converted into electrical waves, which is amplified and converted into the images which we acquire in the screen. Okay. The UBM principle is same as ultrasound principle. So here we have two types of scans. Okay. There are two types of scan, which is radial scan and transverse scan. Okay. You can see the probe image, right? In this probe image, there will be a small red dot. Okay. I don't know whether it is visible for you people. Is it visible now? Hello?
Yes, Madhu. We can see the probe.
Small dot.
I didn't see that. Maybe.
Okay, there will be a red small in this probe. There will be a small red dot. Okay. So based on that, we'll place that dot over the limbus. That will define our directions of the clock hours which are going to scan. Okay. Then that dot will just indicate indication for us to see which clock hour we are scanning. Okay. So for the radial scans, the probe will be placed perpendicular to the limbus. Okay, so when we when the probe is placed perpendicular to the limbus, we get these radial scans. Okay, you can see the image, right, for the radial scans. In that image, I have you can see the C is nothing but the corneal layer. Okay, anterior and posterior corneal layers. Okay, AC is nothing but the anterior chamber. Okay, those arrow marks indicate the angle structure of the eye angles. Okay, PC is the posterior chamber, and the LC is the lens capsule, anterior lens capsule. CB is the serially body region, and the S is the sclera. Is it clear? Any doubt?
Here, Madhu.
These are the structures. These structures will be seen in all images. Okay, the images will be like this only. So corneal, anterior chamber, posterior chamber, anterior lens capsule, CB region, and sclera. These things will be visible in the radial scans. Okay, in the transverse scan, the probe is placed parallel to the limbus. Okay, when we place parallel to the limbus, it bisects the ciliary bodies. It bisects the structures. Okay, so we see deep into the layers. So here you can see the top region will be the episclera. The very hyporeflective is there. No, the first layer that will be the episclera. Then we have the sclera, and then is the ciliary body, from where we see the ciliary processes. You can see the process like structures, like they are the ciliary processes. For every patient, we scan the ciliary
One second,
process.
Madhu, another repeat panna, the second transverse Madhu.
Transverse,
Hypo,
Now is it clear? Now is it clear?
Yeah.
Yes, Madhu.
Okay, the first layer is the episclera, then comes the sclera, then where the processes are there, no, that is the ciliary body region. Okay.
The
So in
hypo
case-
region in between the hyperreflectivity, one hypo region is
that
there.
is
Right?
that differentiates, that is there in the image, but normally that will not come. Okay,
Okay.
that differentiation will not be there normally. In this type you will see in cases of effusion, I told, right, when there is abnormal accumulation of fluid in between the sclera and the choroid, you can see like this. Okay, but in the normal image it will not be that much visible, normal cases.
So if that is diffusion, this would be the image, right, Madhu?
I will show you that later. It will come. Okay,
Okay.
clinical condition images are there. Types of scan is clear.
Yes, Madhu.
Yes.
These scans is mainly that is
It is not
visible in this.
visible.
Actually, Siddha, for different ultrasound biometer, the marking will be there in differently. For our place, it will be in a red color dot. Few centers they are having a kind of a arrow mark. It will be like a kind of a different color, not of the same color.
In this
It will be it will be in the neck
probe-
region, actually. It will be in the neck. Yeah, it will be in the neck
Black
region.
color
where-
region.
Yeah.
Or we can take that.
Okay. Okay.
Side.
So it will be mentioned in one particular slide.
You can see, 1 minute. See that you can see that metallic thing.
Yes.
That is the transducer. Okay, and the black portion is only the probe. The transducer will only have that 50 megahertz. That is only made out of the frequency, and 50, 35, whatever it is there. So the probe region will have that marking.
Okay. Probe.
Handle. Okay, I will explain you the position in the clock tower image. Hello. I'm mm. It arrow will go in facing the it will facing the patient. I'm okay. It will get immersed inside. I'll tell you how. When we place the probe, no, the patient will ask the patient to move the eyes, right? When I scan a 9 o'clock position, 9 o'clock hour, I will ask now you take right eye. Okay, right eye. I'm telling respect to right eye only. Patient is sleeping. We're asking the patient to see temporal side. Okay. I'm leave the 9 o'clock. When how I do the clock hours is I place the probe that direction towards the opposite side. Okay. Now the patient is seeing sleeping. The patient is seeing the temporal side. Hello. Patient is
madam.
seeing the temporal side. Okay. I will place the probe in the nasal side. Okay. Hello.
Understood.
Clear?
So it will be slightly slanting, right?
So
In case
yeah.
transverse.
Transverse.
So radial scan, it will be straight.
Radius
Madhu,
means it will be
just
straight.
tell them in clock hour. If you are now, Madhu, if you are now going to take the 3 o'clock hour, then where you position the probe?
See,
Like that you can see.
in right eye, I will ask the patient to see the temporal side, and I'll place my probe in the nasal side, so that I'm scanning the 3 o'clock hour. Understood?
Yes.
Okay, clear?
Yes. Clear.
My red, that the arrow mark will be towards the temporal side only. Understood?
Yeah.
Clear? Siddharth? This is for the radial scan. For the transverse scan, what I will do, I will place it in the 6 o'clock hour.
Okay.
Understood? So radial scans, the direction of the probe will be perpendicular to the eye structure. Okay.
Okay.
And while doing the transverse, when it will be parallel, right? So when I do a 3 o'clock scan, when I do the transverse of 3 o'clock hour, that red color dot will be facing towards 6 o'clock. Understood?
Just perpendicular. If you are going to take
Now you understood this image. Now you understood the drawing which I did there. 3 o'clock hour, that arrow mark will be there. That will be radial scan. Okay, wow. When I place it to 6 o'clock, it will be a transverse image.
And actually, we used to take radial scans for each and every clock hour. Transverse scan only for the quadrant. Transverse scan it will be like superior, inferior, nasal, temporal. 4 quadrants mattum now. But in case of radial scan, each and every clock hour we can take the scan.
You understood now?
Yes, Madhu.
So this is the first image in this it is the central scan, that is axial. Here we take from sulcus to sulcus. Okay. The patient is asked to see straight up, center. The eye will be placed in the center. Okay. Exactly, it will be seeing the top. We'll place here for the central scan. We take a transverse scan. Okay. Hello. Clear?
Okay. Yes, Madhu.
So you can in the first image you can see it is a normal structure. Okay. You can see the cornea. You can see the anterior lens capsule. You can see the posterior lens capsule. I'm telling the vertical one. Okay. Here we measure the anterior chamber depth. We measure the lens diameter. In this, it is only vertically mentioned. We measure the horizontal diameter of the lens also.
Okay.
The second image you can see it is a cataracted lens. Okay. So you can see both the diameter of both the edges of the lens will be it will be very visible. You can easily measure the diameter of the lenses and vertical and horizontal.
So hyperreflective part is the opacity of the cataract.
Yeah, that is cataract lens. You can see the full cataract hyperreflective. Here it is normal lens, clear lens, and this is the cataract lens. The cataract lens will be like this only.
Okay.
Clear now? Telling. Coming. This image is IOL image. IOL is there. When IOL is there, you will see like this only. Okay. So now we'll see the images in glaucoma cases. I have few different glaucoma cases and how the UBM image will be there. Okay. This is the plateau iris configuration. Can anyone tell the features of plateau iris? Anyone knows? The basic clinical features which is available, which you know for plateau iris. Okay, I'll tell. In plateau iris,
One second, Madhu. Where the iris configuration is changed to convex or concave. Based on that, it changes.
Yes.
Is there any relation to that?
Yes.
Okay.
So main features for plateau iris when we see in glaucoma is how is the iris placed, how is the ciliary body, and how is the sulcus. Okay. This is the normal image. You can see the normal image, right? You remember the structures? Yeah, I don't know how to place pointer. Okay. In the first image in the right top, you can see the difference in CB region. Okay. You can see the gap between the angle and the CB. You can see how the CB is there in both. This image, you can see this CB region. It is anteriorly placed and it is big also in size. When you compare the CB region here. Okay. What happens in plateau iris is the sulcus gets narrowed. Okay. This is the normal CB structure. And here you see it is big and the sulcus also is narrowed. Okay. And in plateau iris, what happens? There is angle closure, right? Here we can see the posterior elevation of the iris. See how the iris is. This iris, and you can see how the iris is. It is flat. It is like a line, right? And here it is little bit elevated. Okay. So we mostly, if we find these features, we write it as a plateau iris configuration. Okay?
Is there any marking, Madhu? Is there any marking, like you can take a marker or any measurement near that angle, and we can measure that angle also, so that we can.
Yes, we can measure. We have tools in to measure the angles. How much angle is that? That we mostly measure in the central image. You can see here. This region, they will measure the angles. This region, mostly this region.
Yeah.
Okay. So next, in pigment dispersion syndromes, we see a lot of pigments, right? Here they will ask to see whether pigments are there in the zonular regions or not, whether it is blocking the trabecular pathway. So here we do two types of scans, one in dim light and one in normal light. Okay. So what happens? You can see the pigments here. Like this hyperreflective dots will be there in the UBM scans. Here you can see. In this actually, you can see a white line above the normal. This line, can you see? That these are zonules. Okay, these are the zonules. In those regions, we will check whether any pigments are there or not. and we'll see whether in these in the near the sulcus whether pigments are there or not, hyperreflective echoes are there or not. Okay. So in what happens in dim light is these pigments will be seen more. It will be more visible when compared to normal lights. So in pigment dispersion syndromes, we will we'll take scan 2 times. One will switch off the light and take, and then one will do with the normal light.
And
so pigments will be easily visible.
During the dim light, what happens? The people will dilate. So in that case, the pigments will be dispersed more. So that's why we are doing in both dim light and the normal room light conditions.
Yes.
So usually we do the UBM in normal light conditions.
Normal light only.
Normal light conditions.
No, what is the visibility playing a role in ultrasound? Whatever the substance.
No,
it is based
pupils
on
dilate. No.
Yeah, pupils are going to dilate then. So that
Pupil dilate. So more pigments get dispersed. More pigments get dispersed. So more pigments will be visible. Easily will get visible.
The quantity of dispersion will be higher when there is when you switch off the light. That's what you mean.
I mean.
Yes, Siddharth.
Yes.
Because there will be iodose cellular contact. In that case, the pigment will be dispersed more, so we can differentiate very easily.
Doubt.
Anyone having doubt?
மது இப்போ வந்து ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் நீங்க கண்டுபிடிக்க முடியுமா pigment dispersion syndrome இருக்குன்னு?
They'll normally diagnose when pigment dispersion is there. Consultant will always normally write only they will refer, right? So we see the file when they write about any pigments, when we see sitlamp, if they write any about pigment dispersion syndrome or any pigments, then we do both dim and normal light UVM.
That is fine. In case if
normally if we see some pigments, we will mention like pigments are seen near the zonal lesion light. Based on that also they can diagnose that pigment dispersion. But that time we don't. If we have doubt, we just switch off the light and do the particular scan if they have not written in the file.
Okay. Although let's say if we have a who's having a dispersion syndrome, but we don't know actually. We have only the report or only the pictures. Will you be able to identify the pigment dispersion syndrome with the image only?
If only the reason is only glaucoma, no other any like cataract or nothing, because in some trauma cases anterior capsule rupture means the lens matter can also come out, right? So those hyperreflective echoes cannot be considered as pigments and all, right? So it may be artifact also. So when we scan, when we see the scan, when we see the video while doing the scan, that time we can analyze. Based on the reports, we cannot tell that these are pigments alone.
Fine. Okay.
While scanning, we see the video, right? So we might know like near the lens these pigments are there. Here these are there. It might be pigments. It might be some other hyperreflective echoes, right?
Okay. Continue.
Next is cyclodialysis. Cyclodialysis, nothing. I told you about the effusion, right? So in this image, you see this is the effusion. I told you, right? Accumulation of fluid in between the sclera and the choroid. So this is the effusion. Okay, you can see the gap between the choroid and the sclera.
Yes.
Hello. So in cases of hello.
The sclera arises.
Which one? Sclera. Between the sclera and the choroid, posterior region. Okay. So when the effusion is there, we need to see about the CD cleft also. CD cleft is nothing but cyclodialysis. Cyclodialysis is nothing but the gap. You can see the breakage. What happens? It creates there. there becomes a gap. Okay, cleft like things form. So what happens, this there is an abnormal connection between the AC and the posterior chamber. So what happens, this fluid comes in contact with the anterior chamber. You can see this gap. This gap will not be there in the normal structure. Okay, the cleft is
Okay,
not
okay.
you will find a pathway opening, abnormal opening, which will there will be a contact between the anterior posterior chamber.
Okay, okay.
This is on, you can see clearly in this.
Yes.
Is there
There will be a
hole
drift between the
directly?
hole. There will be a tear or a pathway formed, not a hole. We cannot tell about a hole. When the efficient reduces, this will also reduce. The cleft will
Okay,
close.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
Next in we'll see about angle decision. What how in cases of trauma, if the gonioscopy is not done, we need to mention about angle decision also in that cases. Okay, so this is the
Okay,
normal, the black arrow indicates the normal angle structure. This is how the normal angle will be. Okay, to see whether any angular resistance is there, you can see the difference. How is it?
Yeah.
yes, we can.
Hello, you can
Yes, we
clearly
can.
understand with the image, right?
Yes,
You can
Yes.
clearly understand with the image itself.
yes,
You can see the difference.
yes,
This
yes,
is how
yes.
it angle decision is seen in UBM.
Okay.
Madhu, only in angle resistance you will be seeing the angle like this, or in any other cases you will be able to see the same type of images? Any other cases?
If no, on mostly in recession only it will happen like this. Indication for recession is trauma or any other surgical way.
Okay.
Mostly is trauma only, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Madhu, if you see in both the images, even the cornea looks, slightly different. So in the image one, it is slightly clear, whereas
Actually,
the
no,
other,
this they have zoomed and taken the posterior surface.
Yeah.
Like they have just showed only till this much. That's why
okay,
That is the
to show the
Okay.
difference in angle. That's why.
okay.
You people are understanding interpretation. Is it clear? Any doubt till now?
Yes, Madhu, we are going good.
Okay. This is about malignant glaucoma. Okay, what happens in malignant glaucoma is all the structures are anteriorly displaced, right? Iris, like we have peripheral anterior synechiae, then the growth will the CBE structures will not be properly right? So here this is the normal image, and here you can see how it is. You can see the peripheral anterior synechiae. You can see the iris is attached to the cornea.
Yes.
So based on these things only we write the reports. How is it? We'll just write the. Here you can see the iris is totally plastered to the cornea. It is not. It is not like PIS. PIS also. It is like it is totally plastered, right?
Yes.
In
Yes.
PIS, what happened? Only the peripheral cornea and the anterior iris will be attached. Little bit only attachment will be there.
Okay.
Okay, it will be only till to small regions. Here you can see the iris is totally plastered.
Yes.
So based on these images, we will write the features of malignant glaucoma. Okay.
Okay.
Here also you can see how the iris is. You can see the bowing. Here you can see the anterior bowing of the iris.
Yes.
All the structures are located anteriorly. see how the iris is bowing. So the CB is also anteriorly dislocated. The sulcus is narrow.
Okay, is there any chance a convex iris pattern looks like an Seine if it is an advanced convex pattern, in case if there is a iridolenticular Seine and then the iris might bow in. So will that look like in any way?
Yes, in cases of microspherophakia, it happens, right?
Okay.
When the lens pushes, you're asking that only, no?
Yeah, it is like, is there
Is
any,
that?
what I'm asking is, this is
Mm.
a classic case of iridocorneal Seine. What I'm asking is, in case if there is an iridolenticular Seine, actually the iris actually bows.
The image.
So will that look like similar how?
Here you see. You can see the iris and lens touching.
Yeah. Let me complete my question.
Similar.
What my thing is, my question is, in case if there is an iridolenticular Seine, there might be a bowing of iris. Okay.
Yes.
Is that bowing looks similar to iridocorneal Seine, or it is it will never look like an iridocorneal Seine in case if there isn't too much of bowing?
In irido and corneal, it will be anterior bowing, right?
There will be an anterior bowing. Is there any scenario
Yes.
whereas advanced anterior bowing looks almost same like an iridocorneal Seine?
No, Siddharth. Actually, in that
Advanced
case, what
bowing
happened,
will actually have a touch,
medulla-
right? Advanced iris bowing it will result in anterior Seine only, no, Siddharth?
This is like in case if it is a bowing, there is no, I mean, there is a touch, there is no exact like pasting like how it actually occurs in Seine. So it is like, is there anything where we can differentiate that, or is there is nothing like that?
Madhu, I think is telling, will you be able to identify whether it has been plastered or it is just only touching with an UV image?
Yes.
Am I right, Siddharth?
Here you can see, here it is just a touch.
Okay.
This region, it is only a touch, Siddharth.
Okay.
You can see the anterior bowing also. You can see the bowing also, right? Touch and bowing. When I showed, you see it is totally plastered in the. This is totally plastered. Like this only we can differentiate.
Okay.
Here also you can see bowing, but here it is just a touch. It is not plastered, right?
Because you see a small.
This region you can see, it is bowing and touch. It is not plastered. Plastered is like there will be no bowing. You cannot differentiate between corneal layers and cornea and iris structure, which you can see in this.
Okay.
I cleared it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now we'll move in the lens and role of UBM in lens and zonules. So here we'll see whether zonules are present, whether it is completely absent or it is sparse. Okay, and in cases of PC integrity also we'll be seeing in mostly in cases of posterior polar cataract, they will check for PC integrity. And then we'll see for the IOL in cases of haptic, in glaucoma cases, like lens induced glaucoma cases, they will ask to see whether any haptic is there, whether the haptic is rubbing the iris, whether the haptic is rubbing the cornea. So in all these cases, they will ask for UBM. Okay. Here I showed you the zonules, right? This is totally a complete zonule loss image. In above the normal, you can see one straight line, right? This is how zonules will be visible. When the zonules are normal, and intact, it will be like this. And here you can see loss. So totally it will not be there. Okay. During in cases of SPAS, you can see zonals just hanging here and there. This is complete loss of zonals in this particular quadrant, this particular clock hours. So in cases of trauma, we can while seeing the slit lamp, we can see, right? Or in cases of any subluxation, to decide the, in some cases we cannot identify which clock hour, which side the lens is subluxated, right? So when based on the zonular structures, we can tell whether how the lens is subluxated. When the zonals are not present, when the zonals are not there in the nasal clock hours, we can easily tell that the lens is subluxated temporally. Clear? Doubt in this?
Clear, Madhu.
We will check the zonal integrity in all clock hours. Okay. Now I'm scanning from 1 to 3. Okay. When the 1 to 3 of the right eye, when the zonals are absent in 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, so we can easily tell that the lens is subluxated temporally. If the zonals are not present in 6, 7 and all, we can tell absence of zonal in inferior quadrant. So the lens is subluxated superiorly. Okay. Clear?
Yes, clear.
Okay. Next is we can see in cases of trauma, we'll have that the capsule is ruptured. So here the images of ruptured anterior capsule will be like this. You can see it is clearly visible in this. We can the anterior capsule is not intact, so the lens material is coming out here. You can see the first and second images.
Yes.
So this is how an image will look when the anterior capsule is ruptured. This image is for the cases of subluxated IOL. You can see how the IOL is. You remember the first image where I showed the IOL central scan? Yeah. And see, this is the subluxated IOL. Here it is anteriorly subluxated IOL. Okay, and here it is posteriorly subluxated IOL. So when we are doing the radial scans, we can easily tell if this is a 5 o'clock hour for the right eye, we can tell the IOL is subluxated intranasally. Clear? So based on the scans, based on the which clock hour the IOL is present, we will tell which side it is subluxated, which position it is there. Okay. Clear?
Yeah.
So for mostly for the lens, any related to lens, we will be like any cases of trauma, we need zonular integrity, PC integrity, and lens status. They ask for UBM. Mostly it is in trauma cases only, phacodonosis cases only, because they need to place the IOL, right? So when the PC is not intact, in cases of trauma cases, if the PC is not intact, they will not place the IOL in the bag, right? So mostly for placing the IOL, they will ask UBM before the surgery. Okay, even in the if the anterior lens capsule is ruptured and the posterior is intact, they can place the bag IOL in the bag, right? So most indication for UBM is to see these only. Before the surgery, they will ask. Next, we'll go for the cornea and ocular surface disorders. In ocular surface disorders, I told you mostly it is to see for the depth of the mass lesion and to see the AC structure in corneal opacities. So in cases of corneal edema, the cornea will appear hyper-reflected. The gap, this gap will not be seen. You can see the difference. we cannot see the layer's depth, which layer is affected in cornea and all. But if we change the probe frequency to 50 hertz, some little bit difference will be there in corneal structures. We have not used in a clinic, so we don't know how much difference we see in the structures of cornea. But everyone says that if you increase the probe frequency, the corneal might be visible. But we have not tried, so I don't know how much it will be there. Okay, just in for
Okay.
cornea cases, only the hyperreflectivity and hyporeflectivity will be seen. Virtual gonioscopy in these cases is they are surely ask for UBM to see how is the angle structures. Here you can see iris is, you can see the peripheral anterior synechiae. How is the lens structures? Whether if any to do PK, they will mostly ask to see for the how is the PC, because when we do PK, the posterior things should not affect the graft, right? It should not affect the graft. So mostly before doing the PK, they will ask to see UBM to see how is the PC, so that the posterior matter that does not come to anterior and infect the graft. Our consultant asked UBM for main reason is to see whether the anterior chamber integrity, like the PC structure lens is good or not. Lens structural wise, it is good or not. Here you can see, this is the, you can see how here it is normal, right? This is the sclera and corneal junction. Here you see, you can see the, here you can see the mass. You can see this. So any nodular scleritis or in cases of any abnormal tissues in growth in conjunctiva, you will see like this only. I told you, right? We will see how much depth the mass is there. So here mostly the depth will be seen through the transverse scan. Till which because in transverse scan only we can easily differentiate between episclera, sclera and all, right? So how much is that mass lesion, up to which layer the mass lesion is involving, we can easily see in that. Okay, here we can just see whether it is involving the cornea or not. We can see, right? Here it is involving the cornea. You can see up to the corneal layer, it is the mass lesion is getting involved. So sometimes if it is involving the AC also, you can see that the same hyperreflective membrane will come till the posterior cornea. In those cases, we can tell whether it is getting involved, it is communicating with the anterior chamber or not, or it is just up to the corneal level. So for those cases, they will ask. Main reason for asking UBM is to see whether any AC involvement is there or not. The mass lesion is active, or whether it is in communicating with the anterior chamber.
Okay.
So based on that, they will do the therapy, surgical removal, or what therapy they want to do, radiotherapy or chemotherapy. They will decide based on that. Mostly they will do excision only based on this. Next will ASOCT. Yes, they ask for ASOCT also in these cases, in OSS cases and all. That will give the thickness, how much thickness it is there or not. Here we can just approximately tell. They check, they count, they do both ASOCT and UBM for these type of cases. Any doubt till now? Okay. Next, we'll go to UBM in uveitic cases. I told you before, right? When the infection is active, they will ask UBM to see whether any membranes are there, any tumors are there, which is causing the infection. So here you can see the membranes. The arrow, the white arrow are the membranes. Here in the normal cases, you will not see the membranes. You can see the difference. These are PP membranes. Thick PP membranes that sometimes are very thin, like we saw the zonule, right? Sometimes it will be like zonule only. So based on that, we will write whether the membranes are present or not. Whether these here, if we find any PP membranes, we should mention about whether it is causing any CB traction or not. Here you can see there is a mild connection between the membrane and the CB region. So we have to mention that nothing travel, no frequency travels through that, right?
Okay.
It is not a structure which hits and get imaged, right?
Okay. 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 Okay.
Understood?
Yeah. I got it. But I can't able to see the iris border itself, that large cyst which you saw now. In that, I can't able to see the iris border itself. Where is the iris there? I can't able to.
Because this structure is iris, Amos. This structure is iris. Okay, this is iris, and on top of that you see is this.
Okay. Okay.
In this image, you can easily measure the irises because it has definite. What?
That ball, it got disconnected in between.
Hello. That is not a bar. That is iris cyst, large iris cyst, said by Madhu.
Okay.
Yeah, it is an iris cyst. Hello.
Okay.
Iris cyst will appear like this only in UBM image.
Okay.
Clear? Amos?
Madhu,
Yeah.
Madhu, there is a Lokesh Srinivasan. So
What
he's
happened?
asking how inverse. There is a question from Lokesh Srinivasan. So he's asking how inverse hypopion or silicon oil bubble seen in UPM.
Inverse hypopion or silicon oil bubble, it will be a hyper-reflective echo. You will not be able to see any the posterior structures and all because you will see like this hyper-reflective wherever the silicon oil is there, right? You will see and the hyper-reflective echoes there. Clear?
Okay.
If in anterior chamber, if wait one second, Siddharth, 1 second. In this region, if there was a silicon oil bubble, it will not appear like a space in between. Okay, it will be a very hyper reflective echo. It will not have a definite border. It will not have any definite structures. You can see this region. It will appear like this only. It will appear like an hyper reflective echoes will appear like this only.
Okay.
Okay.
Question is, in case if it is an inverse hypopion.
Yes, Siddharth.
So in case if the patient is in supine position, hypopion is inverse because it has a light waves. In case if the patient is in supine position, will that move towards the center of the cornea?
In that particular clock cover, you will get that hyper reflective echo only. Wherever the hypopion is.
It is a low density. Because of its low density, it is floating up. So my question is, in case if the patient is in a supine position, will that move from the periphery towards the center of the cornea? Because now the top position is at the center of the cornea. In case if the patient is in supine position.
The patient is looking up.
Yeah. So patient is in case if the patient is
Center.
standing, the top of the hypopion is in the superior part. Inverse, in case if it is a inverse hypopion. Okay, so in case if the patient is in a supine position, will the same hypopion move towards the center, because now center of the cornea is the superior part.
Whether you can see these things in UBM, you're asking?
No, it is like in general.
Yeah, he's asking. Yeah, no, he's using some basic information and he's asking the question. Like if the patient is standing, it will be going up. The same
Yes.
patient is gonna sleep there. He's gonna in a supine position. He's asking whether you have tried any patients for reverse hypopion and you got any images like that. He's asking in your clinical
No.
experience.
No. Because we will just get a hyperreflective echoes actually. When we have already seen the cases, we will know it is hypopion or not. Okay, here we are not going to, it is not like a, it is just all black and white images only. You will just get hyperreflective echoes. When what we will not, while doing the UBM, we will not tell that it is a silicon oil or it is a hypopion or something. We just see an hyperreflective echoes. Why these hyperreflective echoes are there? If we see the slit lamp or if we see the file, you will know that okay, because of this silicon, because of this hypopion, we're getting the echoes.
Yeah, the same thing only in all diagnostics examinations. We will be seeing the reports and then we will be interpreting the reports
Cross-checking with the file.
Clinical conditions, clinical examinations, on all those things. Only
And
then
even
we
in the
we can-
report, we don't write that is it a hypopion or a silicon oil bubble. We'll just write hyperreflective echoes noted in these clock hours, suggestive of maybe if the file has a silicon oil bubble means we can write suggestive of a silicon oil reflection. If it has a hypopion means we'll write it as a suggestive of due to hypopion, like that. We'll just write hyperreflective echoes. The same way like we write in OCT.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you, and I'm adding the point to that. The same thing will be adding the informations like that only. Depend upon the clinical case, what we are seeing, we will suggest that this can be this can be this, like that. We can suggest that, but we can't say confirmly in the OCT or UBM or whatever.
UBM images.
Yeah. Done.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
But still, who are practicing UBM and all those things, there is a small one idea that there's the same thing that Siddharth is asking now. Where the eye movements and then the behavior of the condition.
We can just we can see whether any changes are there or not.
Yeah. We can try the images in different directions and we can see whether we can able to get different
what
images.
Happens in some cases, the silicone oil or some, even if IOL, if it is dislocated something, when it moves, right? If it is only subluxated, we'll have that image in that particular clock cover. If it is dislocated and if it is moving, when we ask the patient to move the eyes, the IOL also move, right? So sometimes we get images of IOL or the haptic in many clock covers. So exactly we cannot tell that it is present in this clock hour only, it is present in this quadrant only. So that time we get confused and that time we decide, oh, maybe it is moving, that's why we are getting images in all directions. So the same way happens to the any bubble or any silicone oil is present or any hypopion. If there is any movement and if we find it in many clock hours, and when we see, we cross check with the slit lamp, it is present only here. But in UBM, we are seeing it in many clock hours. Maybe it was moving, that's why we see. So we conclude like that.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah.
Okay, carry on.
Yes, this is a ciliary body mass image. So you can see the normal CB here, and this is the CB mass image. So this is how a CB mass appears in UBM. Clear? This is an example for heterogeneous and hyperreflective appearance of the images. Next, we go to the VR disorders. Here we see about the suprachoroidal effusion. Here only you can see this gap. Here, this is the abnormal accumulation of fluid between the sclera and the choroid. So if the patient is having effusion, we can check. If the patient is having hypotony, we have to see for the effusion. After any VR surgeries, we should see whether the patient is having effusion or not. So this is the clear-cut image of suprachoroidal effusion. This is how it appears in cases. Next, we talked about the FEP, right? So I told the abnormal growth or any abnormal proliferation, we need to check in the clock hours. Mostly in our hospital, the sclerotomy sites, they do in 2 temporal quadrants and 1 in nasal. This is how they perform the surgery. The sclerotomy sites are done in 3 clock hours, 2 in temporal and 1 in nasal. So temporals, maybe it will be a 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock hours, or in 10 o'clock hours, or it may be in 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock hours. So where they do mostly we do scanning in those clock hours to see whether any proliferation is not there or not. So you can see the arrow mark here. You can see these abnormal membranes. You can see, right? This membranes can get confused with PP membranes also. But what happens in FEP is, right, you can see those membranes even in the transverse scans. PP membranes will not be that much visible in transverse. We can find that in radial scans, but here you can see there is a contact between the CB region and with the membrane. So this is how we see FEPs after vitreous surgeries. Recurrent vitreous hemorrhages in retinal cases may be due to these proliferations only. So we need to see about these membranes. This arrow mark, you can see this contact here. Hello. So this is how
Yes.
FEP will be imaged in UBM.
Okay.
Foreign bodies, hyperreflective echoes will be there. So in slit lamp, we see which clock hour it is there or which position it is there. So mainly we focus in that region and try to scan. If it is not there in the slit lamp, and while doing the scan, if we find any abnormal hyperreflective echoes noted, we can write it as a foreign body or not. We need to confirm, because it might be artifact also. If they have asked to the consultant will specifically indicate UBM to see whether any intraocular foreign body is there or not. So that cases only they will ask for UBM. So here we can see the abnormal, you can see the hyperreflective echoes, right? So this might be the intraocular foreign body.
Okay. So you said that artifacts. I was about to ask you, and from the starting of the presentation, I was about to ask this thing. What are the types of artifacts you happen to see in your clinical practice, and what you have overcome there, and what are the things you can say that this may be artifacts like that in certain conditions?
Actually, most artifacts will come during the cases of IOL only. Okay. Because IOL revibrations will be there so much, right? And so we'll have those kind of artifacts. And in some cases, when haptics are there, when we try to find the haptics, so those haptic reflections will appear as artifacts.
Okay. So you're telling that these haptics and then these IOLs are the foreign body, a type of foreign body, right? We are keeping inside the eye. Keeping inside the eye, they're just causing the artifacts. Okay.
Yeah.
Other than this, any other ocular structure itself, the same ocular structures can cause artifacts?
I have not.
You have not seen that.
Like that.
Okay. Eye movements artifacts?
No.
Eye movements.
It is just structural, right?
Okay.
If anything abnormal is there, only it will be reflected.
Okay. Okay, Madhu,
Just
carry on.
yeah, this is the last type. This one I have just mentioned. To whatever we do is an invasive technique, right? So
Yes.
this is an extra information where I have this is a non-invasive UBM, which has some, which is better, because invasive procedure we cannot do for uncooperative patients like children or patient who cannot lie down in supine position. So for those cases, these non-invasive UBM is also available. I don't know whether it is available in India or not, because when I did a JC presentation, I came across this technique. So I thought I'll just give an extra information. So
Okay.
the frequency which is used is 50 megahertz. So here you can see we no need to place a cup, we no need to put a coupling medium and all. It is already fixed in the probe. You can see this
Okay.
image, right?
Yeah.
So we just need to place the probe in which clock hour we need to scan, and then we get an image in the screen.
They are applying any topical anesthesia in these cases?
That because it is placed on the eye, right?
Okay.
We don't place an extra cup, we don't put a solution and all that. Everything comes in that probe. Other than that, the procedure is the same. We do the radial scan, transfer scan, and then it is just a non-invasive procedure.
This is
And then this
or it is replaceable, or you have to keep replacing those liquids inside. So every
No,
for every
no, it is
patient, or
just
how
fixed.
often you just do those things?
It is just fixed like that. What I heard, it was that we no need to change the medium and all. We just need to sterile like how we do the AT head and all, right? That's sterile procedures. Those procedures are only followed. They don't change the medium and all.
Not on supine position, right? Okay.
No.
Can be done both the way.
Yeah, both the way you can.
Because the reason why we are using the supine position is we're gonna use that cup and then the medium which
put
is
the solution and then.
so that's the reason they're maintaining the
supine position.
Okay.
Any other cup size, Madhu?
16
16 and 18.
16, 18, and one more. I don't know whether it's 13 or 14. 13 is available, not 14. 13, 16, and 18.
Okay.
In OT and all, for when we do for babies, we use the 13 mm cup.
Okay.
Hello, Madhu.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hello. Hello.
Priya, you're not audible.
Hello.
Hello.
She's not audible. Let me ask one more question. It is general to all. Just a doubt. In case if there is an inverse hypopyon or any conditions like that, the hypopyons or any other structures are going to be mobile, and then they are going to migrate based on the position of the patient. Either he is sitting or standing, or if he is going to sleep. So in those cases, just take an example of inverse hypopyon itself. In case when he is sleeping, in case if it is migrating towards the center of cornea, how is it going to affect the endothelial count? So because when the hypopyon keeps migrating towards the center, again the oxygen is going to cut, because there is a contact between the aqueous and the endothelius is going to get cut. So if that is going to happen for the entire night for almost many months, so how is that going to affect the endothelial cell count? It is general to all. So is there anything like that, or it doesn't happen? பதில் சொல்லுங்கடா.
ஆக்சுவலி the question is good, Siddharth. நீ வந்து என்ன சொல்றேன்னா லைக் அத மேல சுப்பீரியருக்கு ஹைப்போபைனா இருக்கும்போது மூவ் பண்ணும்போது எடுக்கலாம் ட்ரை பண்ணலாம்னு சொல்லிட்டு இருக்க. பட் இப்ப அடிஷன் இப்ப அது மூவபிளா இருக்குன்னா அது அவ்வளோ இம்பாக்ட் கிரியேட் பண்ணணும்னு எனக்கு தெரியல. இப்போ இன்கேஸ் அது வந்து அதுக்கு அதனோட அடிஷன்ஸ் இருந்தாதான் அது ஏதாவது ப்ராப்ளம்ஸ் கிரியேட் பண்ண சான்சஸ் இருக்கு. பிகாஸ் ஆஃப் த லெஸ் கிராவிட்டி இட்ஸ் ஜஸ்ட் ஓவர்ஹேங்கிங் தேர்.
Yeah, it's
If in case it
overhanging there.
attach,
It is saying
அதான்
like
அவன் நினைக்கிறான்.
how the bubble is getting trapped into a bucket of water which is placed upside down. So when there
Yes.
just consider water in case
They'll be
there is a
touching
water
in-
bubble, then there is a space which is being created. The endothelium, the main source is again the main source of oxygen is again the aqueous. So when there is a space between aqueous and the endothelium, how is the oxygen and other nutrition
Endothelium.
getting transmitted? And then in case if it is getting affected, the endothelium count will get down. So is there
Yeah.
anything which supports that, or it doesn't happen?
it may have
I
that
think you have to
effect
do
on
a
that.
research on it.
Yeah, you have to do the research on that. But still, that this endothelial count and all, we can't able to see in ultrasound. We want to have some other instrument to see the endothelial count
Yeah,
and
we have to look into.
the impact of the impact of that
SPM
hypopyon.
SPM cases
SPM.
and SPM, we will have to see those things whether it is
This
affected
and
or
then
not.
yeah, we have to see that.
மது ஹலோ
Yes.
மது ஐஓஎல் பொசிஷன் இது மெஷர் பண்ணுமா? அது எவ்வளோ அமௌண்ட்னு அக்யூரேட்டா சொல்லுமா? ஏன்னா ஐஓஎல் பொசிஷன் வந்து சேஞ்ச் ஆச்சுன்னா பவர் சேஞ்ச் ஆகும். ஸோ யூபிஎம் வில் கிவ் அக்யூரேட் மெஷர்மெண்ட் ஆஃப் ஐஓஎல் பொசிஷன்.
We can just see whether it is whether IOL is dislocated or not. Exact position we cannot see. Like how you want a measurement, right? Whether it is
which 1 mm or 2 mm movement.
no, how
Anteriorly
much
placed or posteriorly placed, we know that, right?
we can just see whether it is centered or not, dislocated or it is centered. That much alone we can see. Which clock cover it is decentered, how much decentered we cannot see. We cannot measure.
ஓகே. ஆமோஸ் ஏஎஸ் ப்ரோசிட்டில
Based
பார்க்க
on-
முடியுமா?
Almost left. Yeah. I think you can ask him.
Left.
Dial back.
ஓகே ஓகே ஓகே.
Any other questions?
Any other doubts?
எனக்கு தெரிஞ்சு யாருக்கும் இருக்காது நினைக்கிறேன். இது இல்ல. It was a nice presentation, Madhu. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Sudarshan. I hope everyone understood
Yours was the
the
second
difference
highest.
between the normal and the abnormal.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, second highest. How many people were there?
Almost 20, 21.
Oh, எல்லாருக்கும் புரிஞ்சது. Was it clear?
Yes. That was clear.
Okay.
Okay.